Okay, let's go over part two of this particular segment. I had to cut short because I got a phone call and I can't have like phone numbers popping up on my screen. Dan Quayle, I can't even, dude. Mike Pence was being advised, according to Midas Touch, Dan Quayle was being advised. I'm sorry, Mike Pence was being advised by Dan Quayle during the insurrection. I don't know how many of you knew that, but apparently that was what was happening. So let's go.
Potato. Make sure you always eat it with your potato.
Potato.
No. You gotta wait till the vice president. You gotta let him see it.
Try
one more time. You gotta add a little bit to the end there. Spell that again. A little bit on the end. Think of potato. How does it? You're right phonetically, but what else? There you go.
Fucking idiot.
Next one. Police.
Oh my god. I can't even.
Potato.
Obviously, he doesn't know how to goddamn spell. And he did that in a public forum, and this motherfucker ended up advising Mike Pence during an insurrection, you guys. All right, hold up. Let's get back to this.
And almost brought down a democracy. In that, we never had Spiro Agnew or one of the vice presidents testify against Richard Nixon. But here, page 16 of the New York Times. Like it's any given Sunday. Hey, interesting. It's beyond interesting. And to answer a question that comes up on social media, it is unlikely that he took the Fifth Amendment. It's unlikely that Mike Pence asserted his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination because he thinks he's the target of a crime. He did put up, people might be confusing, he did put up an initial fight against testifying to the grand jury, claiming that he was covered by the speech and debate clause of the U.S. Constitution because in his role as president of the Senate, he has certain speech and debate legislator type privileges. And
Which totally don't matter because, like, we already had that publicized on TV. So, like, everything that happened in his course of doing business as the president of the Senate, we already have all that on fucking television, okay? That was like a distraction argument because the argument really is what sort of conversations did you have leading up to that vote to pressure you to overthrow the vote? That's the question. And what happened afterwards when you were they were trying to assassinate you? Trump's people were trying to assassinate you. I can't believe he fucking were being advised by Dan Quayle. This is so crazy.
Boasberg, the chief judge of the D.C. Court of Appeals, or D.C. Circuit Court, in evaluating it said, for the limited time that you stood at that podium with a gavel, counting votes and things around that, sure, you ought to have a privilege related to that. But everything else and every conversation else and every email and text and analysis is fair game and get yourself into the grand jury. The Court of Appeals agreed. Trump appealed. It was denied. And then within 10 hours of that court denying the appeal.
Want a second income stream? Because if you...
The Department of Justice had enough until Mike Pence get into that chair. They weren't giving him any more time because, frankly, they want to wrap up these investigations just the way we do. They want to get to a charging decision one way or the other, just like we want them to. And so we know there's a series of grand juries that are present because of reporting about subpoenas that have been issued and topics that have been discussed, even though all of the grand jury machinery is supposed to be secret. But we know from the reporting, one is looking at the Jan 6th, the day of Jan 6th and everything about it, how we got there, what happened there and who's responsible for what happened for this siege laid on the Capitol. We have one related to the grift. Donald Trump raising hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, trying to separate his donors and followers from their money on the back of a lie that he won the election and it was stolen from him. That is another one. Mar-a-Lago and the purloined, mishandling, and stolen classified top secret documents by the president, now ex-president of the United States, on the way out is another topic. And Mike Pence.
I'm sorry, centrist, but like, how can you not make a bigger deal about the fact that Mike Pence was being advised by Dan Quayle? Why is this being brushed over like Dan Quayle is a reasonable or actual person with credibility? The dude showed us in real time that he's fucking ignorant, and you're just breezing past this. Oh my God. Midas touch, you got to do better.
We don't know exactly which of the grand juries he's testifying in front of. Pretty sure it's the Jan 6th one, and the clinging to power could also be the one related to the fundraising. But in any event, this should not end up in the dustbin of history or at the bottom of the birdcage, as they like to say about the old news business, right? Yesterday's news ends up at the bottom of a birdcage. Don't put this at the bottom of a birdcage. This is really, really important stuff. He did not likely take the Fifth Amendment, back to my original point, because we would have heard about it. Because if he took the Fifth Amendment, then the Department of Justice would have popped back out, gone back.
But you know what? You can't make that assumption because we haven't heard shit. We have not heard shit. We don't know what's happening. We have no clue what's about to happen. We don't know. For fuck's sake. The transcript hasn't been released. So we don't know how cooperative he was during the 8 hours that he was there on, what was it, Friday, right?
To Judge Boasberg and had an argument about Fifth Amendment privilege, and the judge may have said, give him immunity if you want him to testify. But since we didn't hear about an immunity Fifth Amendment privilege struggle, it's likely that Mike Pence did not assert the Fifth Amendment, which would cast him as a potential criminal as he runs or considers a run for office. So he likely testified in a sharp.
But you don't know that. We have no idea how cooperative he was. We have no clue because there's no fucking transcript. So this is all just like speculation at this point, trying to get some fucking clicks on your channel. We don't know what fucking happened because there's no transcript.
And powerful way against his former boss behind closed doors. Trump's worried if all the reporting about the 3 or 4 witnesses to his phone call, in which he called them the P word, called Mike Pence the P word, and I don't mean Pence, said he's a wimp, commented to others that the calls to hang Mike Pence were.
What's the P word? I'm sorry, I'm a little older. I'm a little more modest. What's the P word? What do you call him? What's the P word?
Were appropriate. And if he said what we all believe he said, Donald Trump, about Mike Pence, that he made a mistake 5 years before in picking him because he wouldn't do his bidding to overthrow the country at the appropriate moment, then the social media posting that Trump put out as soon as he heard that Mike Pence was testifying, which is, I've always trusted Mike Pence. I'm sure he's doing the right thing. That's like whistling in the graveyard because he knows that Mike Pence is telling the truth to save his own hide and avoid criminal culpability. And that's what happened this week. That's extraordinary. And I don't want it to be lost, which is why I'm bringing it to you again in this hot take so that you can digest it and understand it. I do hot takes like this about every day. I do them on the Midas Touch Network so you don't lose the thread of what's really important. And if we're right, that either Mike Pence is the last or the second to last witness in these prosecutions and these decisions to prosecute. Are we going to see Mark Meadows? I mean, he got stripped of all of his executive privilege immunity. He's not a lawyer, so there's no attorney-client privilege. Are we going to see the former chief of staff, who is in every room that matters involving this coup, involving this insurrection, involving this conspiracy to cling to power? Every room, on every call, on every text, in every decision, is Mark Meadows. Does that make him a target so that he's going to be charged along with Donald Trump? Isn't that more likely? That he's going to be a witness that's going to come in and not put up his Fifth Amendment privilege. Because if I were a betting person, if there's somebody that's going to put up their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination, besides John Eastman, it's Mark Meadows. So whether they get him to testify against himself and cannibalize himself or not doesn't matter, because that last piece of testimony by Mike Pence should be the dagger through the heart of Donald Trump in the cases that matter. We'll follow it on a show that I co-anchor on Wednesdays and Saturdays called Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network. And like I said, you can follow me here. If you like this content,
Right,
do a
we
thumbs
don't
up.
need that. We don't need that bullshit. Okay, Leftist Mafia, fellow live streamers, Michael Richards, Bo the Fifth, Andrea. Can y'all dig into this and figure out what the fuck Dan Quayle was doing advising Mike Pence during the insurrection? Because that's some weird ass information that I think y'all need to follow up on, right? Let's go. Figure out what the fuck he was doing getting advice from Dan ass Quayle.